I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and blank off and take care of that. Joe, the floor is yours now.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing in Western Australia? Good to be able to work with you today. You have a lot of familiarity with EDI, so we're going to the next levels of it, but it will be a refresher. We really feel like, especially, our pedagogy of explicit direct instruction that we developed and came up with, it's always a fluid pedagogy because we're always in the classroom. One thing that we do, we're in classrooms very, very consistently. We've seen, I know myself, I've been in thousands of classrooms now, and what that helps us do is put our theory into practice very consistently and very regularly, and we're not afraid to make changes. Usually, the fundamental principles of EDI are always seem to they stay the same. We believe in teaching first. We believe in giving a lot of engagement to our students. We know how they need to retain information. Actually, usually most of the time, a lot of the changes or modifications we make depends on the school, depends on the classroom, depends on the type of students. I've taught many lessons for the same fourth grade class. I've taught many lessons for fourth graders, but in different classes with different ability levels, and it might look a little different. So we modify these strategies based on the needs of your particular classroom and your students. Okay, so what we're going to start is lesson design. Before we even get started with that, one of the things that I'd like to go over as far as how this works is we really emphasize student engagement. Okay, and what I mean by that is we need our students doing something. We don't want our students sitting for very long periods of time listening to our voices because the brain doesn't retain information that way. The brain and the learner need to be participating in their learning. And what we mean by participating, from the very simple thing of reading a sentence with us, to pair sharing, to thinking about things, to anytime we can get our students engaged in an activity, in something, we call them the engagement norms, keeps them engaged with us because it's very clear that the person who is talking is the person who is learning. So how do we get our learners and students to talk? That being said, the strategies we're hoping you will incorporate in your classroom are the same strategies I use as a presenter. One thing in the last 2 years that we've learned how to do, unfortunately, is how to modify our strategies for remote learning. So even if you're participating on a Zoom workshop, how can I get you engaged? I know one thing very clearly. I'm in Zoom workshops all week long, and it's very difficult for me to pay attention, especially if I'm just listening to the presenter talk the whole time. So I understand how that sensation feels. So for the people listening to my workshop, I'm always thinking, well, how can I get you engaged? So I'll just show you someone that we cite before we start our workshops. Today, I will be asking you to do some of the engagement norms. I'll ask you to read with me. Now remember, because you're on Zoom, I can't have you all unmuted. You must be muted, but because if I had you all unmuted and you read at the same time, there's a delay and it would just go off. So I'm having you read with me because I want you to really think about what you're saying. And believe it or not, reading out loud helps you, a certain part of your brain, to retain that. It's a part of we need repetitions and exposures to remember something. So when I say, can you please read this with me? For my students, I might track with them. I'll read it first and then they read with me. But with adults, I'll just have you read this very important section that I want, or sentence. So you read with me. One of the things I need you to do is pair share. I know when we set these up, right now everyone is an individual. You don't have a person to pair share with. Everyone's in an individual computer screen. Is that correct to see that? So ideally, we usually recommend that you're...
Joe, sorry to interrupt you. If you look closely, there's a couple people who are pair sharing. Not a lot, though, if you look kind of closely. I think Belle and Leanne are definitely one. And if you guys can wave to the camera, so that way Joe... No, okay. I'm talking about them. I'm talking about them.
Well, we'll figure something out. I don't know what the COVID restrictions are, or you know, what's in. I know a lot of schools we can't pair share right now, but maybe later for the second half we can break out in groups of 2 somehow, because pair share is one of our most valuable engagement norms for many reasons that you will see in a little bit. But we need you collaborating. We need you discussing with your colleagues, because you get to hear answers. You get to tell your answers. You get to practice your answers. You get to reduce your anxiety. So that's a way we get. How can I get my participants? The person who is talking is the person who's learning. So anyway, we'll start here. So all the things that we're doing today, I will randomly select you as well. I have a randomizer with numbers. So I'll randomly call on someone in the screen because I'm checking for understanding. How well did you understand what I just taught? And I'm making a decision. Are you understanding this very easily, and should I speed up? Is there some confusion? Should I give you another example? Is it because of anxiety? Is it because you don't want to, you know? So I'm making a lot of decisions that I make with my students. So we randomly select participants. I also will ask you to use your whiteboards if you have them. Do you have whiteboards in the presentation? Yep. Because I need to check for understanding. Are you understanding this? That's a bad example. Let's say, are you understanding this? Yes. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. That we'll start with that. That way I know. But honestly, if you're not, I want to see that so I can clarify, because we believe informative assessment. That's real-time checking for understanding. Okay, I want to know when I teach something right there on the moment, on the spot, how well did my students understand it right at that moment? Did I give them enough time to practice it? Did I give them enough examples for them to understand it? And how clearly do they understand it? And now I can gauge that. So I check for understanding in real time with a randomizer. To randomize, it's a random selection, or with whiteboard. And that gives me a lot of information. The way they respond to my questions, are they getting this? Can I move on? Do I need to clarify? Can I differentiate? Can I have some of my other students teach some of the ones who don't have the correct answer? We believe
Camera's on, but I have a full
powerful strategy, as opposed to teaching students some material and then a week or 2 later giving them the weekly quiz and grading their quiz to see if they understand it. Sometimes that might be too late, because we've already really made our brain has made might have fossilized a mistake that we're making, or a comprehension. So we want to get our information in real time. So if everyone can read with me, ready, 1, 2, 3. I hear and I forget. I see and I remember.
I do and I understand.
Confucius. Okay, so he understood. He's probably one of the first researchers we would, and he wasn't a researcher, but he understood how the brain and how we learn as humans. Not very small percentage of us are auditory learners. I hear and I forget. This is really important as a teacher to understand. If you're talking and you're expecting your students to understand, and if they're saying yes because they're hearing it, it's very hard to retain and keep that information in. In fact, it usually goes in one ear, literally out the other ear, because you have to do more with that information as a learner. Okay, that's just the way our brains work. Our brains take in information, and it drops a lot of information very quickly. We need to get that information, and we need to process it somehow. The way we process it is we hear it first, and then I see and I remember. Then we need multiple examples of that information so we can start making connections to what are those words actually mean? Oh, can I see some real live example? And then finally, how do we have true deep understanding? I do and I understand. Okay, can you actually do what I am teaching you? And let me show you a little example of that. What I mean by that, I can teach students this definition. Context clues can be nearby words or pictures that help determine the meaning of words. I can even get them to memorize that. I have a lot of tricks up my sleeve, from mnemonics to cognitive brain strategies. I can teach them a gesture. Context clues, I have a nearby word, an unknown word. Context clues are the nearby words to help determine the meaning of the unknown word. And I'll get them to memorize that definition. Doesn't mean that they understand what a context clue is. It's because they heard that definition. In fact, I'm very careful not to ask, what is a context clue, as my questions to my students? Because you truly understand what a context clue is when I give them this definition. Now I give them an example or multiple examples. I have exhausted. The context clues running hard or nearby, they let me know what exhausted means. Now they can start contextualizing, they can start understanding, oh, that's what those nearby words, that's what it means. I even give them examples of non-examples, and now I can ask them, what is a context clue? Which one is an example of a context clue? Now I'm starting to see real understanding. And what is the last thing I really would like to see them do? Write a sentence for each picture. Use context clues to provide information about the word. Read the sentences. Can they produce context clues? That's deep understanding of a concept. That's where we're going with EDI. That's what Bloom's taxonomy, we're going to talk in our second session today when we go over higher order thinking. That's where we want to get in EDI. We want to get to create, evaluate, and analyze of Bloom's taxonomy. This is going to be what my second session will be with you, is higher order questioning and differentiation. And I bring this up because a lot of schools have started the explicit instruction journey in Australia, okay? But there's many forms of explicit instruction in Australia. Explicit instruction, first of all, there's direct instruction, which is a very scripted type pedagogy of delivering instruction. It's very scripted, and the responses are repetition. A lot of repetition, and which is very important. Now, explicit instruction, what we've seen are usually the warm-ups or the daily reviews, where they're using our engagement norms, our pair sharing, our whiteboards, and checking for understanding, but they're still just usually repeating definition. They're saying, oh, context clues, nearby words to help determine the meaning of unknown words. Oh, everyone knows it, great. But if I ask that student, give me an example of a context clue. Where have you used the context clue? And they can't answer, they haven't understood that yet. So they're usually here at the remember or understand. Eventually, we want them to get up to here. Can they demonstrate what a context clue? Can they differentiate, compare and contrast? This is an example of a context clue because, and this is not an example of a context clue, not enough information. Can they evaluate? Can they justify, defend, or judge their answers? And lastly, can they create? Can they create context clues? Can I give them a word or a picture and say, hey, use descriptive language that we'll call context clue that'll help your reader know what that means? That's the level of understanding we want to get. And honestly, that's probably the biggest misconception I see when I come out into to Australia about people's understanding of explicit direct instruction. It's usually the level of questioning that they are asking their students is usually at a very low level of Bloom's taxonomies, remember and understand or repeat. And our premise of EDI is based on higher order questioning, because we understand to get deep understanding of concepts for long-term memory, you have to really dig deeply into understanding of a concept. Okay, so that's why we ask you to do that, and that's hopefully you'll see some of that. That's going to be the focus of our lesson today, and of our workshop today, and especially the second half of it. Can everyone take a moment to read this? This is we work a lot with some of the top cognitive brain researchers in the U.S., especially that when they apply it to learning, especially learning in the classroom. Richard E. Clark works very closely with us. He's an American who works in California, one of the top cognitive brain researchers. Paula A. Kirshner, Australian, who's in the same field, and John Sweller, Kiwi, from New Zealand. Don't hold that against him. He's still very brilliant, but no, I'm just kidding. But he's a Kiwi who they all got together. How does the brain learn? What strategies can we use to maximize that? So take a second to read this passage, and I want you to pick one sentence out of there that draws your attention and that you want to discuss. Go ahead and read that. Okay, so normally in the classroom, this is when I would have you pair share. And we're going to talk about pair sharing when I go over the engagement norm. Pair sharing is powerful as an engagement norm because once you have an idea, once I ask my students a question, especially if it's a cognitively demanding question that a higher order question should be, to gain their confidence, I let them pair share. Okay, so they can practice their answer, so they can get feedback from the partner they're pair sharing with, even little ones, even foundation year ones, year twos, so they can reduce their anxiety, so they can hear different versions, and so they have multiple exposures to that information. So here I would have you pair sharing, but since you don't have a pair share partner, I'll give you think time because that's also very important, and then I'll call on someone. Maddie, which sentence did you choose and why?
I chose the small group and independent problems and projects can be effective not as vehicles for making discoveries, but as a means of practicing recently learned content and skills.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and why did you choose that sentence? What drew your attention to it?
Because I think trying to figure out how EDI can support the independent practice is the part that I haven't been able to make connections with personally yet, and figuring out how independent practice can give the students multiple opportunities to apply skills in different contexts.
Beautiful. I love that. Yeah. So, my background, especially my dissertation when I went back to school for my teaching credential was in constructivism. It's an inquiry-based pedagogy. I'm very familiar with inquiry, and I believe very strongly in it. And I understand the power of how a learner can really, from coming up with their, from a project, how they can really get a connection to the material, especially in great projects. But what we start finding in education in schools is if we start with projects too soon, they'll always say, they say about 20% of their students will be able to be successful because they have just enough background knowledge to be successful. But a lot of your students, the majority, will be spinning their wheel and not really kind of understanding what the goal of this project is. We need a result. There is an end goal of what we're trying to give them that project. We want them to leave understanding a simple concept. Maybe it's maybe it would be the area of a square. How can I get my kids to understand this concept? So what we advocate, what we learn is, look, if I can teach the concept of area to my students and make sure all of them understand it, then I can take those students and get them in a project-based learning environment where they can reinforce that. We're not saying to do EDI all day long for every lesson you have. We're saying to start with EDI, ensure that all your students understand the concept that you're going to be incorporating, and then it's really fun. We believe very strongly about project-based learning, real-world application, and we give our students a lot of those, but we have to make sure that they're going to be successful when they implement them. I'll give you a really good example of what I'm talking about. This is the end goal. The end goal is that they can do real-world application, that they can combine multiple concepts and put them into play and application. So for third graders, for example, I might want them to design a garden. And something that they could really enjoy. We love these types of activities, especially as learners. But before I start with the project, I teach them specific concepts that I know are essential for them to be successful in the project. So I'll teach them 4 lessons. This particular project that we created, they need to know, determine the main idea of a text, because they're going to read a lot of informative text to be able to research so they can start this. They're going to need to generate and plot length data. So they're going to put that all together. They're going to need to measure area of plane figures, areas of squares or certain geometric shapes. And they're going to have to determine unit fractions of whole and fractions of a whole. So if I teach these 4 lessons, I know now, and we would have these lessons for you to teach. I'm hoping eventually now they can get into these real world application. Hey, you are helping your mother design her raised bed garden. You will have to plan how much space will be used in the backyard and in each raised bed. Then you'll figure how it is watered and what plants to put in the garden. Part 1, research raised bed gardens. Figure the total area of the backyard space and the area of raised bed. Determine what fraction of the total garden space is each raised bed. Practice math skills for the next part. So now they can apply that. Now they can get into these projects. The key for us is that they all have an understanding of the concepts that are going to be used in that project. So Maddie, that's what we're that we advocate for. It's like, hey, no, let's get to these projects, but let's make sure they're enriching to the students, that they can all participate. Because if you start with that project too soon, a lot of students tend to be the passive learner, hey, I don't know why we're doing this, but it's fun to be with my mates at the same time. No, we want them to actually really all participate and be a benefit, reinforcing what they learn. So does that help you? Does that make sense how we would address that? We don't start with the small group, we get to the small group, okay? We are going to start with engagement norms today. I'd like to show you what our engagement norms are. These engagement norms, this is the teaching, this is the application. These are the little strategies that I'm constantly using in my lesson, okay? So please read this with me, ready, 1, 2, 3. Student engagement is created when the teacher asks the students to do something. I'm always asking them to do something with me because I know one thing. If I've heard my voice for longer than 3 minutes in a classroom, I'm in trouble, especially for young kids. Foundation year 1, year 2, they're going to be droning off. They're not retaining that information. I need to find a way to get them to do something with me. And these strategies not are only to engage them, but they have some really benefits, especially the first 3. I'll explain the benefits of it. The first 3 are for reading, to support my students' reading, particularly their reading fluency. So the first one is pronounce with me. Everyone read this with me. Ready, 1, 2, 3. Supports students' pronunciation. Beautiful. So what we're going to do for lesson design is first, before you start lesson design, before you can design an EDI lesson, you must understand what a 7-component lesson is. And we're going to talk very specifically about it. We have lessons that are 7 components, and everyone's going to have access to Enunciation. So Enunciation is our lesson bank. So everyone can go into Enunciation. You all have accounts to this if you don't already. If you need accounts, Joel Soto, you just need to get him your emails to him. So you'll have accounts to this for at least, I imagine, 2 months. We always give to anyone who does a workshop, just so you can see what a 7-component lesson is. So here, these are all our lessons that we've created. There's 7 components, and what I mean by that, all our lessons have a learning objective, which in Australia is usually referred to as a learning intention. We have an activating prior knowledge, which is not, we will go over this, where the students already know a little bit of something about what we're doing. We're making that connection to them. But now we have concept development. So they have conceptual understanding of what we're doing. And then they have skill development and guided practice, where they actually do what we're asking them to do. We will identify characters in a story. They will have multiple examples of that. And then we'll have relevance. Why is this important for you to learn this today? And then finally, closure. Can they do this independently? Okay, so that's why we have 7 components. So when we have 7 components, that's the first thing our lessons have. But we also look into how are we going to deliver this lesson? So we use a lot of academic vocabulary, and obviously there's content vocabulary. So when we tell you to pronounce a word, well, what is going to be difficult for my students to pronounce or read? Remember, this is for foundation or year 1 students. Now I'm looking for a high usage word in this lesson. It's going to be characters, but it's going to be something that they're going to use throughout the lesson. I cannot pronounce every word. For example, hey, you know what? This might be difficult for students to pronounce. Josie or Hosey or whatever, Josiah or what. I'm not going to pre-pronounce that. I'm going to just read it for them so they can hear it. So when we pronounce something, I pick a word that is high usage. In this learning objective, characters looks like something I might want my kids to practice and read with me so they can, because we're going to be using it throughout the whole lesson. So what are my pronounce with me strategies? I know it says EL on this, English language learners, but our English language strategies are very sound teaching strategies we use with all our learners. Okay, so these 4 strategies for pronounce with me, there's number 1, clear enunciation strategy. I clearly pronounce the word that I want them to pronounce and read with me. Okay, let's look at this word, mitosis. Your turn, class. Mitosis, again, mitosis. Yes, that's how you pronounce and read that word. Everyone pronounced it and read it very well. Component. Your turn, class. Component.
Component.
Component. Your turn, class. Component.
Component.
Clear enunciation. It's usually 1 or 2 very key words or a phrase, not full sentences. We do a different strategy. This is also a different way of pronouncing. Word chunking for pronunciation might not follow the syllabication rule. So if I have a word distinguish, distinguish. Okay, and you don't have to use your arm. This is how I teach early childhood. I've always used my arm. You can even point for older kids. I just point to the word distinguish, distinguish. Okay, however you're comfortable. Doesn't have to follow the syllabication rule. Okay. Physical pronunciation strategy for older students. This is a really strong EL strategy. But for early childhood, it's also very powerful, especially if you're teaching them phonics and phonemic awareness. Physical pronunciation strategy is a very powerful strategy to use. For example, if you are teaching M makes the M sound, we teach our students, what's the physical pronunciation of M? Yeah, what is going on? Yeah, see how you're kind of your lips are kind of almost puckering like you're about to give a kiss or something. Or maybe not use that, but that's the example I would use. Look, boat and boat. 2 words, they sound very similar, but they have 2 different sounds in the beginning. The first one is boat with B. B makes the B sound. Boat. Okay, so that would be boat. Now, when you do that, what's happening with your mouth when you make that sound? Boat. It's almost like my top teeth bite my bottom lip a little bit. Boat. You see that? Everyone make that sound? Boat. Huh. But now let's look at this word. Boat. Everyone say that? Boat.
Boat.
With the B or B sound. But that's a different way of making that sound. Boat is boat. Okay? See, that's physical pronunciation. So that's the strategy I would use. I usually use it for early childhood students learning to read, especially phonics and phonemic awareness, because they have to differentiate sounds and differentiate how to say those sounds. Now, if you're teaching older kids who already know how to read and are good decoders, but if you're in a content-specific subject, like usually math or science, we have what's known as backward syllabication strategy. Can everyone look at this word? This is the word for DNA. DNA is the acronym for this word. Can everyone try to read this word right now? Read it to yourselves. Okay. It's probably been a while since you've seen this word, unless you're really into science and reading articles on science, or you might not have seen this word in quite some time. But we all know how to read in this group, and we know how to decode. And if we know how to decode, we can decode the first 3 or 4 syllables very well, but we'll taper off if it's an unknown or new word. And what I mean by that, it'll look something like this. Okay, deoxyribonucleic acid. Did you have that experience? You taper off on those last, you will decode the first few syllables with confidence, but because you're used to seeing them. But if there's more and more syllables, you will lose that confidence and you'll start tapering off. Deoxyribonucleic acid. That's what happens that's a phenomenon that occurs very commonly to students who know how to read, who will see these new words. Pythagorean theorem. Okay, that might be something that, hey, I know I can read the first two syllables, but I'm gonna have struggle on that. So what we do is called backward syllabication, where we build on those words. Okay, class, we're gonna read this word, but I'm gonna read it first, and I'm gonna start from the back. My turn, listen carefully. Ready? Nucleic. Your turn. Nucleic. Ribonucleic. Your turn.
Ribonucleic.
Oxyribonucleic. Your turn.
Oxyribonucleic.
Deoxyribonucleic.
Deoxyribonucleic.
Finally, deoxyribonucleic acid. DNA. Your turn.
Deoxyribonucleic acid.
You keep building on the last few syllables, and it's not one syllable at a time, it's multiple syllables at a time, and you can do that for a lot of words. Look at, even my second or third graders who are starting to decode. Before we read this, let's build on it. Squish, and I'll read for you instead of unmuting, so we'll do some unmuting when I actually do some lesson delivery, but right now, just for pace, I'll do it first, but when I point to that, simulate like you would be reading this with me. Squish, squish, extinguish, extinguish, distinguish, distinguish. See how that works? Look at this word right here. It takes a little time to try that. Shun, ciation, nunciation, pronunciation. You build on it, okay? So these are my 4 pronounce with me strategies. This is a good one. Shun, ciation, enunciation. Your turn. Enunciation. You build on that, and that's for students who can already read and decode. Okay, clear enunciation, chunking for pronunciation, physical pronunciation, backward syllabication. Okay, the next one is track with me, read with me. What are we doing? Can you all read this with me? 1, 2, 3. Help students read new words. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm looking for a sentence in my lesson of which sentences am I going to pre-read out loud for my students to support their reading of that. It usually has a lot of the new vocabulary and content vocabulary words in it. I'm not tracking with me and reading with me everything. That's too cognitively demanding. Usually the learning objective and the definitions and concept development. And it looks something like this. Everyone do this with me. Track with me. Do it. Track with me. Read with me. Track with me. Read with me. Track with me. Students are listening while you read. Read with me. When I'm pointing, it's their turn to read with me. Now, even my early childhood students, I get, okay, let's get our tracking fingers out. My little ones have their tracking fingers so they can follow along what I'm reading, so they can make the associations of, oh, that's how you pronounce and say that word. Now, for my older students, they probably 80% of the class could probably read a lot of these sentences. But the benefit of this is for the students who need the support reading it, they get to hear it orally. So they hear that sentence out loud. And even for my students who could probably read this independently, it's another rehearsal, it's another exposure to the material. So remember, if a student, this is for reading fluency, if a student doesn't have fluency, reading fluency, it's very difficult to attain comprehension. And what I mean by that, if a student read this sentence like this, student engagement is created when the teacher asks the student to do. If you're reading at that fluency level, it's very difficult to get comprehension. We start with oral comprehension. The more oral vocabulary we have, then we transfer it to our reading fluency. So when we hear something, student engagement is created when the teacher asks the students to do something. We're going to have more success in understanding it. But as a student, now they can have support in reading it. So it'll look something like this. I'm going to read this definition. Track with me, class. My turn. Student engagement is created when the teacher asks the students to do something. Read with me, class. 1, 2, 3. Student engagement is created when the teacher asks the students to do something. Very nicely read. Even my students who could read that independently in the beginning, they're getting a rehearsal. They're getting another exposure or repetition of that information. Repetitions are very important as well. Okay, so talk with each other. How do I use the first 3 strategies? And what's the difference between pronounce with me, track with me, and read with me? Pronounce with me, 1 or 2 words. Track with me, when the teacher reads. Read with me is when all the students are reading with me. Go ahead. Here I would have you pair sharing because I've asked the question. There is no pair share, so I'll give you think time. You just tell me, well, I think the difference is between this is this, okay? All right, Sherry, what are the differences between the 3?
Okay, pronounce with me is when you're choosing specific words to pronounce correctly. Track with me is when you're getting the class to follow along and not reading themselves, but following along with the words. And read with me is when you're reading all together.
Beautiful, very nicely done. That's a very succinct explanation of the differences between the 3. And it looks something like this. All right, before we read this, let's take a look at these 2 words. Unit, fraction. Your turn, pronounce with me, class. Unit, fraction. Again, unit, fraction. Your turn, unit, fraction. That's how you read those 2 words. That's pronounce with me. Now, I'm going to read the whole learning objective so you can read it successfully after I'm done. My turn, track with me. We will determine the unit fraction of a whole. Your turn, we will determine the unit fraction of a whole. Very nicely read. And I might even have some students read that. That's track with me. That's pronounce with me. Track with me. Read with me. Okay. Here's why we teach first in EDI. Who can give me the definition of a prefix? Who can give me the definition of a prefix? Can you raise your hand if you know the definition of a prefix? MSD teaches. Okay. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, about 18 or so teachers. Okay, 2 people raised their hand. MSD. Who can give me, and keep your hand up if you can give me the definition. Who can tell me the definition? Okay, 2 people raised their hands. Now, this is also anxiety. Okay, this is why we recommend don't start with your students with their hands up. Okay, how about if I did this? Who can give me the definition of the prefix? I'm not going to call on you, so don't worry about it. Raise your hands and show me. Okay, a little different now. A little more, a few of you more can answer. Okay, that's anxiety right there. We don't want to raise our hands usually as learners. Not when we ask a question, even if we might know the answer, because it causes anxiety. Anxiety is very uncomfortable. It's a very uncomfortable state to be in. So learners are constantly in anxiety, okay? Especially when they have to speak in front of their peers. So, but here another thing, I'm sure with the confidence of MSD Teaches and Hazel, they confidently raised their hand. I bet if I would have called on them, they probably could have given me the definition of a prefix. That would have been great. In fact, that's how I used to teach my class. I'm going to be teaching prefixes today. Who knows what a prefix is? That's how I started my lessons when I first started teaching, because I was taught the KWL method. Now, if MSD Teaches told me the definition of a prefix, that would be beautiful, but I didn't teach her anything. She came to my class with that knowledge. In fact, I didn't teach that. We call that talent discovery. I've discovered someone who already knows the definition of a prefix. That's why in EDI, we tell you, no, give everyone an example of a prefix so everyone has a chance to answer, and then we'll see. Now we can, and then once they have that, then let's see if we can extend their thinking. So here, I would teach it first. A prefix is a letter or letters in front of a word that changes its meaning. Now remember, we don't hear just auditorily, but you just heard it. Class, here's how I'm going to remember this. Ready? 1, 2, 3. A prefix is a letter or letters in front of a word that changes its meaning. Everyone do that with me. Ready? 1, 2, 3. A prefix is a letter or letters in front of a word that changes its meaning. Okay. Now make sure when you're teaching a gesture to your students, they're saying the definition with you. We're combining all the modalities of retaining that information. We're verbal, We're listening, kinesthetic, so they have to say it. That's the key, is that they're saying it with you. Ready? One more time. A prefix is a letter or letters in front of a word that changes its meaning. Go ahead and teach that. Here I would say, teach that to your pair share partner. A's tell B's, oh, a prefix is a letter or letter in front of a word that changes its meaning. B's tell A's, a prefix is a letter or letter in front of a word that changes its meaning. Now they've practiced it. They've rehearsed. I'm reducing their anxiety. Okay, they get to practice it. They get to rehearse. And now I can ask a student, any student, engage if they understood what a prefix is. So if I did call on someone, Helen Waller, can you tell me what a prefix is using the gesture?
Okay. A prefix is a letter or letters in front of a word to change its meaning.
Beautiful. And you weren't even one of my first original. Now I would give you multiple examples of a prefix. Look, re in front of re-test is a prefix. Re, R-E, in front of test changes the meaning of test. Re means to do again. So when I do re in front of test, it means to take the test again. Redo in front of re in front of do means to do again. Anyway, I give multiple examples. Be careful. Read, R-E, in front of at isn't a prefix because that's not in front of a word. So now I give multiple examples, and then I could ask my students, which one is a prefix? How do you know? Gestures are powerful because a lot of us are kinesthetic learners. It helps our students remember. Yeah, so even high school students and my older kids, look, the concepts get a little more difficult. So it's hard to come up with gestures and everything, but if you just keep it simple. So the older the kids get, I don't have gestures in all my lessons. But I
Joe, it's Joel. Joel. I know it's harder for everybody to follow. Joel, in the chat, someone said, I find gestures hard because the children focus on the actions over the words. What's your thoughts on that?
Let me show you on an example of how we combine our gesture. The key to gesture, I connect the gesture to the definition. Then I connect the gesture to the example. So the kids are seeing. I must ensure that my students are doing the gesture and saying the gesture. Most times when you teach a gesture to a student, one of the first mistakes we make is we just have them doing the gesture without saying it out loud. They must be using and saying what you want them to say as far as the definition out loud with you. Now, gestures are tricky because a gesture can't be more difficult than the actual definition. You're asking them to memorize something, a gesture, okay? So you have to explain to them why it's important. So if you make your gestures too difficult, you're cognitively overloading your students. So sometimes the students might be concentrating too hard on the gesture. That can happen sometimes. In fact, I'll share a story. I was working with a teacher, and she was showing me an example of a lesson, and she's like, look, I thought of a really great gesture, and it was main idea with supporting details. And so she's teaching main idea to her students. All right, students, let's look at this paragraph. A main idea is the main part of this paragraph. And every sentence, some of them can be your supporting details of the main idea. And that is how a main idea has supporting details. Very long gesture. And afterwards, she even turned to me and she winks at me. She's like, how'd you like that gesture there? And I'm like, ooh, okay. And, I'm like, this is going to be an interesting compliment sandwich. No, the gesture was too difficult for her students to memorize. You got to keep it very short and very succinct. Okay, main idea. I have a story. Supporting details are a few of the sentences that really connect to that main idea. Can you say that with me? Okay, now I'll connect it to that. Look at the main idea of this paragraph is dogs, why dogs make great pets. That's the main idea. Okay, they're very loyal, they're protective, and so I connect it. Okay, that's how you get them. You reinforce that gesture. So sometimes if you make it too difficult, that can be one of the reasons, but it looks something like this. Here's how I would connect my gesture to my example to my non-example. Okay, and I need repetitions of the gesture. They can't just do the gesture one time. So Shireen, I hope this will clarify some things. All right, track with me, class. Context clues can be nearby words or pictures that help determine the meaning of words. Read with me, class, 1, 2, 3. Context clues can be nearby words or pictures that help determine the meaning of words. You know what? I have a way to remember this. Context clues. I have a word that is unknown. Unknown word. Everyone point to their unknown word. Point to it. Context clues are the nearby words. Explain your gesture. What does this mean? They're nearby. See how they're nearby that unknown word? And they help determine the meaning of the unknown word. Basically, context clues are nearby words, help determine the meaning of the unknown word. Very simple gesture. Boom, boom. But now you have to connect it to the example. That's how you contextualize definition. You need to connect it to example. Let's all read this together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Marcos had been running hard in soccer practice. He was exhausted. Let's pretend we don't know what exhausted means. See, that's an unknown word. Marcos had been. That's nearby, but that doesn't give me enough information. Marcos had been sleeping, had been eating. That doesn't tell me what exhausted is. Running hard, that's nearby. When I'm running hard, I get very tired, especially in soccer practice. Running hard is the context clues because they're nearby and they tell me exhausted means tired. That's why it's a context clue. Exhausted means tired. Marcos was exhausted, right? That's not an example of a context clue. Exhausted, my unknown word. Marcos nearby, but Marcos was what? Marcos was tall. Marcos was angry. Marcos was, I need more information, not a context clue. See how I've connected it to the definition. See how I've connected it to the example. We've rehearsed it. We do need multiple exposures. Now I can go to a higher order question, and we're going to go over the higher order questions because it's part of the differentiation later. So that's how I use a gesture. You're going to see a gesture earlier for characters. Don't worry if you don't have a gesture for every lesson. You actually won't be able to, especially once you get up to 4th and 5th and 6th grade. It's very difficult. In fact, early childhood, I have gestures for 60, 70% of my lessons, and 4th and up from 4th to 6th, maybe 40% of my lessons. High school, maybe 20 or 30% of my lessons. But I always have a cognitive strategy. I can use root words. I can use something to help kids hook the information into their brain with a cognitive strategy. Okay? Pair share processes new information to understand. Very valuable engagement norm. And the 15 reasons to pair share, student engagement pair share. Number 1, read this with me even though you are on mute. And even if you're, I know I'm not, I know this sounds silly, but try to read this out loud. It's a multiple pathway to your brain. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Every student orally answers every question. If I'm having my students pair share, hey, who can tell me what a prefix is? If only MSD teaches and Hazel raised their hand, okay, only they answered the question. Only the student with the raised hand. But if I have them pair share, every student in my class answers that question because they have to in the pair share. Automatic wait time is embedded. You need think time before, so students can process the information. Some students, a lot of students sometimes know the answer. They're just on the tip. They can't, it's literally stuck on the tip of their tongue. So we think they don't know it because they can't answer right away. Well, if we give them wait time or sometimes even de-escalation, they can answer. Listening and speaking is included. So the student hears an answer and then speaks the answer. Student engagement improves because they're more interactive in their classroom. It's more of a classroom and a learning environment. Students remember more because it's more of a repetition and a rehearsal of information. We need to hear information multiple times. We can't just hear information one time and expect our students to remember it. Increases the student talk to teacher talk ratio. They say that in elementary classes, the teachers tend to talk 60% of the time and the students 40% of the time. And that's divided between 20 or 30 students. What we're trying to do is how can I get my students to talk? This person who's talking is the person who's processing the information. Students practice their answers so they get a chance to reduce their anxiety. I tell them, I'm going to randomly select you. I need to understand if you understand this information. But before you do, you're going to hear a lot of examples. You're going to get to practice in your pair share, and you're going to be confident when you know. And even if you don't answer it, that's okay, because I will support your learning. I'll show you different examples of it. Okay. Provides language translation time. If you have ELs, they need even more think time, because they're translating the question into their own native language from English, thinking of their answer, and translating back into English for their answer. Short attention spans are addressed. Even if our students are really concentrating, the brain fatigues. There's a misconception that we say, well, adults have a 40-minute attention span. Yes, we have 40-minute attention spans, but during that 40 minutes, it's not all equal. We have ups and downs in that attention, okay? And in fact, the first 15 minutes are the strongest attention, then our attention dips, and then we have, in the last 10 minutes, a reboot. But we can keep addressing that by having them pair share or being engaged. Now, that's for adults. Foundation year ones, we're looking at 15 minutes attention span, depending on the time of day, too. And they say it grows by 3 to 5 minutes per year level. So if foundation was 15, year ones are 18 to 20. Year twos are 21 to 23. Year threes are about 25 to 22. So we have limited attention span, but that whole attention span, there's different times where we need to reburst that within a pair share, reinvigorates them. It provides the first reteach because they're reteaching each other. Classroom management improves because the students, it's a learning classroom environment where they're participants. We are social beings. We want to communicate and have dialogue with one another. Instruction is more interactive and interesting for the students because they're active participants. Allows for academic socialization where they can practice the academic language. They are not accustomed on the playground. They're usually not going to have that academic socialization on the at home. So in the classroom, we want to ensure that they're having that chance to have that. If you have the benefit, instructional aids can be utilized. If you have that luxury, use them as a pair share partner. And number 15, reduces the affective filter. I don't know if anyone's familiar with this term. An affective filter is when the learner is at such a high level of anxiety, he cannot or she cannot retain information. They're literally a deer in headlights, or not literally, they're figuratively a deer in headlights. And they're so anxious, they can't retain information. And so how do you reduce that affective filter? Well, if you teach first with a lot of examples and they can start chipping away on the understanding, and then they can pair share and practice their answer and rehearse the answer and hear it, you start reducing the affective filter, and then they can hopefully answer with some confidence. Okay, so those are 15 reasons to pair share. I want you to choose one of these reasons. Wow, this is a great reason why I pair share. I know we probably pair share already. Why do you pair share in your classroom, and what are some of the benefits you see to pair share? Go ahead. Here I would have you talking with each other. So if you can write either 1 through 15, just write the number on your whiteboard and be ready to show me. Three, two, one. Show me your whiteboards. Okay, Hannah, can you show me number 9? Or why did you choose number 9? Short attention spans adjust.
Because I teach pre-primary, so they're smaller and the attention spans are real short.
Yeah, they are very short. You know what? Let me explain something too. Pre-primary, foundation, year 1, year 2. Be careful how many pair shares you incorporate too. I'm always looking at my clock. I'm thinking to myself, okay, I've got a 15-minute, and that's lucky. Pre-primary, maybe 10-minute attention span. So I have to think to myself, I can only have maybe 1 or 2 pair shares, because after the second or third one, I might not be able to get them back. They might just start pair playing and, petting each other. That pre-primary, I can always get that story. Where like, no, it's pair share, not pair touch each other. You know, but you teach them how to think about it, and you tell them the importance of the pair share. Okay, so yes, and you tell them why, and we're going to talk about this in a second of how you establish your engagement. I want to make sure of some ways to go over and set up your pair share is really think about your desk arrangement, how you even think about setting up your classroom. I would recommend labeling your desk so everyone knows who their pair share partners are, so they can turn. I know when I taught, I mainly taught 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So I'd always have my students moving from different, each lesson, if I was teaching math, I'd teach, and then I'd have different students in different activities. So they'd be moving around my classroom throughout the day, but they'd always look at their desk and they could see, oh, I'm an A here or I'm a B here, no matter where they work. They already understood where they were. Even my little ones, I see early childhood teachers who label their carpets. They get Velcro and label their squares. It's very beneficial for those little, especially, you know, the kindies that you're teaching or the pre-foundation, you know, you're literally just teaching them to social norms, classroom norms. Hey, this is what it's like to be in the classroom. You know, here's why, and here's, you know, we're learning how to just sit in the classroom and, you know, to learn. We're not learning to sit. Please do not go thinking that I would teach students how to sit. I mean, I am teaching them, you have to sit for a little bit. We're here to learn, and here's how we learn. You know, you got to keep in mind, Hannah, what you mentioned, those short attention spans. Yeah, I teach them for about 10 or 12 minutes with a lot of information, but then I get them up and I get them moving and I get them wiggling and I get them out and I reset their attention span. This is for all ages. Know when their attention spans are tapped out, so you reset them with a quick brain break. Really important for them. Okay. Attention signal, everyone. This is pretty straightforward. 1, 2, 3. Eyes on me. Your students for song. Eyes front, back straight. Up, ba, ba, ba. Students response. You're just getting a synchronized reaction to get them back from a pair share. Now, Joel mentioned this. We're going to talk about it. Whiteboards, chin it. We're going to check that all students are learning. The whiteboards, I check for understanding in real time in 2 ways. I check with random selection. So I'm calling my students randomly, and I'm checking with whiteboards. Early childhood, I might just have a green dot, red dot, yes or no, because I don't want them writing too much. They're still developing their motor skills just very quickly, and I have to teach them how to use a whiteboard. We practice showing me the answer. They show me red dot. When the first time I teach early childhood, pre-foundation, show me red dot. More than half the class will show me green because they're looking at red. It's just the way it is. So now it's like, no, no, no. You show me, you show me red. Oh, I see that. I need to see that. Okay. So everyone, show me red. Just, I don't even say yes or no yet. Show me red. Yes, that's red. Okay. Now red means no. Okay. So I'm going to ask you, who can tell me no with their whiteboard? No, no, show me with your whiteboard. No, you know, all the things, they take it so literally. No, show me with your whiteboards. Yes, red means no. Green means yes. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question. Are you at school right now? Yes, I'm at school. Yeah. No, no, no. Can you show me with your whiteboard? That's not, and it takes time to train them. You know, for older kids, they can write on their whiteboards. They can start showing me, but I show very little. The key is that I teach them how to justify their answers. Why did you choose B? And can you justify your thinking? Why is there reasoning behind this? And the next section after our break is all about higher order thinking and justification. You're going to see a lot of examples with the whiteboards on that. Okay. Now the key to whiteboards, if more than 30% of my kids, so if I have a class of 20 and about 6 of them are incorrect or more, that's looking like a whole class error. So I'm going to reteach my whole class. If less than 30%, what would that be? Yeah. If less than 30%, if under 6 or about 5 are incorrect, that's looking like individual error. 15 or more students know the correct answer. So that's individual student error. So I'm going to see if I can let those students correct that misconception. And you'll see that in the next sitting, how we do that. That's part of my differentiation process.
Okay, and Joe, we're at the 9-minute mark, okay?
Thanks, Joel. So whiteboards, I'm showing that whiteboards, I'm making a decision on how to use it, but they're giving me a lot of information. They're justifying their answers. And then lastly, I have complete sentences, public voice, academic vocabulary. Okay, promote the rehearsal of the new language. I always have my students answering in complete sentences. Be careful not to get into it's very easy to get into the group short answers. Which one's the answer? How do you know? A, B, is it D? A, B, C. And I know sometimes we want that fluency. No, I need them to answer in a complete sentence. Which one is an example of a context clue? How do you know? Oh, A is the example of a context clue, and I know because we always want our students to answer in complete sentences, because I know if they're answering in complete sentences, that'll quickly translate into writing in complete sentences. That's how you develop language, is speaking. So you hear first, then you speak, and then it'll transfer into your writing. Our students, even our English-only students, will get a lot of conversational English very quickly. We need to develop their vocabulary, and usually that vocabulary that we need to expose them to is the academic vocabulary in the classroom. So those are the answers we want them to use. For example, if I'm teaching a lesson on context clue, the question I ask my students sets them up for their answer. So what the words I want to hear in their answer, I will use in my question. And what I mean by that, if I'm asking them a question on context clues, I won't say which one's the answer. How do you know? I'll say, which is an example of a context clue? How do you know? Because I want to hear context clue in my answer. Which one is an example of a unit fraction? Why? Why is that an example of the numerator? The words that I want them to use in their answers, I have to use as a teacher in my question. And I might even have them, when you pair share with your partner, A's tell B's, say, it's an example of a context clue because, or it's not an example of a context clue because. Practice that complete sentence you want them to answer it. Okay? So before we go on, we've done a lot of the engagement. I'm going to ask a quick question because I know you work with them. Which engagement norms do you see that you have success with and why? And maybe there's an engagement norm that you've been struggling with and need some support with. I know we have a few new teachers here as well, but maybe there's an engagement norm like, wow, I see whiteboards that could be really, here's an example of a question I tend to get quite a bit. I want to use whiteboards more, but sometimes the kids are looking at each other's whiteboards. Maybe that's a question you might have. What can you do about it? Usually that's one. If you have that question, make sure to ask it. So think about it and be ready to answer out. And maybe you have a question, please raise your hand. We'll do that for the next 5 minutes before we go on our break. Okay, so which engagements do you use? Which ones are very successful for you? And which ones would you like some strategies of how you can implement them a little more successfully? Think about it. 1 or 2 minutes. All right, 3, 2, 1. Let's see. Sam, which engagement norms do you use with success, or do you have a question on an engagement norm?
I do use all of them. I don't think I use gestures regularly enough. I think that's one that I would need to work on. I would probably also have that same question though that you just brought up in terms of whiteboards when you've got some of your students who are maybe struggling a little bit more with concepts and they'll just look at the person whiteboard next to them. So
okay, so
I'm interested.
Let me answer that for you because it might, now that I brought it up. Okay, so everyone uses whiteboards. Who's ever seen some of their students look at other people's answers? Has anyone ever had that experience? That happens at your school. What are you guys doing wrong? You're obviously not doing whiteboards correctly. No, I'm kidding. One of the most common phenomenon. You know why? First of all, do this. Everyone do this. You do this. Humans have amazing peripheral vision. We have just incredible peripheral vision. We're drawn to any movement to our periphery. So if we see someone's whiteboard, it's almost impossible not to look. So we're drawn to it. But that's not why all of our students are drawn to other people's whiteboards. Sometimes they're unsure of the answer. So they're going to look because they don't want to be incorrect. So one of the first things I tell people or my students, whiteboards are for me. They're for me as your teacher. You're giving me information. Okay, I need to know how well I just taught this part of this lesson. Okay, do you understand? Because now I need to know. If you don't understand that, that is okay. I will never call on the incorrect answer first. So even if you have the incorrect answer, sometimes I even tell them to put a question mark on the whiteboard. I need to know if they're incorrect. Okay, so if you have the incorrect answer, I'm not going to call on you. I'm going to call on the correct answers, and I'm going to elaborate their answers. And maybe you as a learner can hear the answers a couple times, and maybe you can correct your own thinking. And if you can correct your own thinking, that's more powerful than me just telling you the answer. So that's the first thing I start with, Sam, is giving them the metacognition. Nextly, if they keep doing that where they're looking and I need to know, I might ask them to tell me the answer first. So I'm like, okay, I saw you chose B. Why is that B? Why is that an example of a context clue? The key to whiteboards when we do them is they must justify their answer. Them showing me whiteboards up, this is never enough, just seeing an answer. I chose B, it's an example of a context clue because those are nearby words and they help me understand what that unknown word is while the other words didn't. They have to justify their thinking. And if they can't do it, then I might have to talk to them at a different level. I'm like, look, I see that sometimes it's not helping you to look at other people's answers. It's hurting you. You're giving me information. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I need to know. And, you know, sometimes they're doing it because they're just embarrassed. No one likes to be incorrect in front of them. Okay. Now, you brought up something really interesting too, Sam. One of the keys to our engagement norms is the metacognition you give your students. You need to train them properly on how to do these engagement norms, but more importantly, on why we do these engagement norms. Give them metacognition. This is just the first year to support your reading. That's really important. Hey, this gesture, I know it sounds silly. We're sixth graders, but no, believe it or not, this will help you. I learned some as a teacher, as an adult, and that helped me with my learning. Pair share. Give them the reasons why you pair share. You know, whiteboards, explain to them what I just explained to you in complete sentences. Hey, this is going to help you sound, to articulate your answers. You're going to sound so much more smarter. You're going to learn all these new vocabulary words. The better you can articulate and speak, the more you can go into any job interview, the more you're going to develop your writing. So I give them metacognition of why we do these engagement norms to get them real buy-in on using them. Okay. So this was just a kind of a review of our engagement norms.
Joe, we did have one question here. The question here is before we go to our break. The question in chat was, can we offer support when posing a question? For example, when I pose a question and can see students looking around, can I go to them during the think time and have a guided discussion?
Of course. You know, of course, if I pose a question, in fact, I'm gauging. When I pose a question, and we're going to see some real examples of lessons. So if I ask my students very quickly, we need to get you to break, but I'll give you an extra minute or two. So you saw me teach this, context clues, nearby words. I gave examples. If I go here, which words in the sentence are context clues that help determine achievement means success? And then I say, pair share with your partners. And I'm listening at the pair share. I'm like, it already sounds a little bit off. And then I'm seeing students just write an incorrect answer before they even start. Yes, I'll go to them. I'm not testing them with whiteboards. It's not an assessment. It's like, I need them to understand it. So however you can get that information across to them, hey, especially that student who does look at someone else's whiteboard, they have anxiety because they already are nervous. They don't want to be incorrect. They're already intimidated. There's probably some things that they're looking at that because they don't want to be wrong in front of their peers. So before they even answer, I go and pair share with them, while my other students who can do it will be doing it and write their answer, and I'll go pair share. Hey, which one do you think it is? Yeah. What do you see how it would maybe be B and why? Now, so to build up their confidence. So yes, you definitely can go and support them And if it's the whole class, I'm like, you know what, before we answer this, I might give you another example. But I want you to save that question because I'm going to show you a lesson on characters. I'm going to show you a lesson on unit fractions. And I'm going to show you a lesson on context clues and how we're putting all these engagements in place. Okay, so this was kind of the refresher on engagement norms, and we're going to put it all into practice. And you're going to see a lot of that support when posing the question. Fair enough? All right, let's take 10 minutes. We'll see you in 10 minutes. Thank you.
Great.
This a little bit, the difference between EDI and DI. And in fact, now that we see a big movement of, we see a lot of explicit instruction in Australia, and explicit instruction, from what I've seen, is kind of a mix between EDI and DI. I know that sounds strange, but it's a lot of our engagement norms. And what I see is the students are pair sharing, the students are using whiteboards, the students are randomly selected, the teacher teaches first. But the questioning is usually at some of the lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy, repeat with me type questions, like repeating definitions. An example of this would be the big thing that we don't use quite as much here in the States is daily reviews or the warm-ups. Do you use daily reviews and warm-ups at your school? We do. Very powerful and very important, by the way. We need those fluency. So please understand, I'm no way saying, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. No, daily warm-ups. In fact, the schools we have who have a lot of success implementing EDI, they use a version of the daily warm-ups. We need those long-term rehearsals for rehearsal for periodic review, and it gives our students fluency. But if you're doing our pedagogy, the key to our pedagogy is the higher order questioning you're asking your students. Okay, that's the difference between EI, DI, and EDI. It's the types of questions that you ask your students. So if it's just a context clues or nearby words to help determine the meaning of unknown words, talk to your partners. What is a context clue? Okay, who can tell me what a context clue is? Nearby words to help determine the meaning of an unknown word. That's not the pedagogy we developed. Okay, it's based on higher order questioning and how the deep understanding. And the reason why is we understand, look, for long-term memory, from getting information from working memory to long-term, we need complex tasks, higher order thinking. Extremely important to get real deep understanding. I do and I understand. Okay, so how do we get them to higher order thinking to mastery? We justify your answers. You interpret your answer. What does it mean? How do you know? Explain your thinking. Can you show me where you read that answer in what you just read? Okay, that's very important to us. Now, what we're doing in EI with the rehearsals, we need repetitions. You're really actually transferring information from sensory memory to working memory. We need a lot of 17 to 24 repetitions to really learn something. So we're really getting that. Explicit direct instruction provides multiple interactions with the content. You need 24 exposures to transfer information into long-term permanent memory. So you're doing both, but we want to eventually get to the deep understanding of it. So how do we do interactions? We do it with pair shares. We do it with track with me, read with me, answering the questions, justifying their answers on the whiteboard, solving problems, and telling me how they did it. Okay, so when I talk to schools and when they ask me to see where they're at in their journey of implementation, the first thing I look at is how well do the teachers use the engagement norms. That's the first piece of the puzzle. Then I look at what types of questions are the teachers asking their students. Because in EDI, the first thing that we have is, if you read with me, 1, 2, 3, EDI lessons contain 10 to 12 higher order questions that are asked throughout the lesson. Okay. After each, if it's not a thinking question, if it's just a repeat a definition or a phrase, that's not a higher order question. It's a rehearsal question. Okay, which is important too, but it's used in a different context. After each question, the students pair share with a partner to interact with the information and to prepare a correct response. Okay, after each higher order question, because pair shares take time. So because they take time, I want them to have thinking questions. Okay, Teachers call on random non-volunteers for individual accountability and to measure student learning. So I call on non-volunteers in 2 ways: by randomly selecting. Even when I'm seeing whiteboards, I'm not calling on a volunteer. I'm calling on the correct answers. Okay, they didn't volunteer their answers. But then afterwards, I do call on volunteers. After a couple of responses, I always ask. I've heard a couple great answers on context clues. Anyone else like to add to that? Are there any volunteers to that? So we do have a place for our volunteers. Students often respond by writing answers on whiteboards. They respond orally. They write short answers on their whiteboard. And students are asked to defend, interpret, or justify their answers. So who was that earlier? I think it was Sam. Oh, Sam, yeah. Remember, your students looking at them like, look, you're going to have to explain why you chose that answer. That's the key to understanding it. Just showing me the answer is not enough. Why did you choose that answer? Can you justify it? Can you defend it?
Joe, really quick light in the chat, we see that Kate was nice enough to share a little bit. Our daily reviews incorporate practice and application with questioning to check understanding as well as memory.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So if you're seeing that, look, I'm not an expert in daily reviews or warm-ups, but every school we've worked with has a form of it, and they've made it. They've kind of everyone is a little bit different, and I see how successful it is because we do need fluency. Now remember, there's a difference between fluency and there's a difference between the higher order thinking. For example, just learning to read, you need fluency. Okay, fluency. That's why high frequency words are really, really important. Someone learning to read must look at the most commonly, most frequently used words, and without decoding them, without trying to think of the phonemic awareness of the sound, they can just read them. Okay, at, the, like, see, am. They can just read them without thinking about them. That's really important to get that cognitive overload off. Now, when they come to a word that they can't, is not a high frequency word, the high thinking is, oh, I can decode this word. I see that starts with the D sound. I know that sound is duh, duh, duh. I can start to try to decode that. So you need both. That's an example of it. Math, you need a lot of fluency too. To do algebra, you need to know your times tables and integers very fluently. As far as your daily reviews, I'd like to see them, but hopefully you can see what we're talking about in our lessons today and incorporate them the way you'd like to. Teachers provide corrective feedback to students as necessary. And I was talking about looking for whole class error or individual student error. If I randomly select 2 students in a row and they don't know the answer, and these students are not my lowest performing students or my struggling students, they're a good gauge of my middle performing students or upper performing students, and they don't know the answer, that's looking like whole class. I'm going to reteach the whole class. And in DI basically is a repetition with firm answers. So the biggest difference, or one of the most important components of EDI is the higher order thinking. And I explained why. And we look at what is known as Bloom's taxonomy. Okay, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 levels of Bloom's. Okay, remember and understand. Can they memorize? Can they repeat? Can they state? Okay, that's at the lower end of Bloom's taxonomy, and it's very important. Okay, can they understand? Can they discuss? Can they identify? Can they locate? Can they recognize? When in EDI, we're trying to get to these 4. Can they? But we use all. Can they demonstrate? Can they interpret? Can they execute? Can they analyze? Can they differentiate, compare, contrast, distinguish? Can they evaluate? Can they defend, judge, support, critique, justify or standard decision? And lastly, can they create? Okay, can they construct? Can they assemble? Can they investigate? Okay, we're trying to get to Bloom's taxonomy so our students have real deep understanding. And that's hopefully will show you some strategies. Plus, it helps me If I ask in EDI, when I'm asking a question, the question I'm asking my students is to my highest performing students. I ask a question to the high-end students, to the whole class. I de-escalate to their answers. Okay, that way I can differentiate. If I start with a very low-level question that everyone can answer, well, my high-performing students will get very bored very quickly. But if I ask a very high-end question that everyone has to think about, I can de-escalate and support on their answers. We differentiate on the answer, not on the question. Let me show you what that means. Ask higher order questions, require students to process content. The difficulty with Bloom's taxonomy is there's so many levels, and there is thousands of types of questions to ask your students, hundreds at least. It's very difficult to know which types you're asking and when and where. We've kind of synthesized that list, and we've come up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 questions in concept development. If you're asking your students these types of questions, you're using Bloom's taxonomy, okay? Higher order thinking, which is an example. And today you're going to see character, unit fraction, and you're going to see context clue. In fact, before I get to this, let me finish context clue so I can refer to it and it's not an abstract example. We have 7 components in EDI. Learning objective, activating prior knowledge. Then we have the teaching actually begins in concept development and in skill development guided practice. That's the main teaching, the new information to our students. So when you're teaching concept development, I'm always following this pattern. This is a gesture for teachers to remember how to teach concept development. This isn't for your students. When I'm teaching concept development, I always think about this. Everyone do this? It's an academic definition. Say it. It's an academic definition of my concept. Multiple examples, possible non-examples, then a higher order question. Definition, examples, non-examples, then a higher order question. Okay, and I'm always doing that in concept development. Then the next part of teaching is skill development and guided practice. Not the next part. The next part of the new learning is skill development and guided practice, where this is what I want them to do at the end of the lesson. Can they look at sentences, see an unknown word, then use context clues? So there's 2 things. So here's how I'm doing my concept development. All right, you've seen this already, so I'm going to go very quickly. Track with me. Context clues can be nearby words or pictures that help determine the meaning of words. Read with me. Context clues can be nearby words or pictures that help determine the meaning of words. Unknown word. Context clues are the nearby words to help determine the meaning of the unknown word. Okay? Let me give you an example of that. Read this with me. 1, 2, 3. Marcos had been running hard in soccer practice. He was exhausted. Exhausted, my unknown word. Nearby words. Marcos had been, not enough information yet. Running hard, nearby, and when I'm running hard, I get very tired. That's telling me exhausted must mean tired. Okay, that's nearby words, so it's a context clue, and it tells me what exhausted means. Non-example. Marcos was exhausted. Unknown word, exhausted. Marcos was, that's nearby, but it doesn't have enough information to tell me what exhausted means. Marcos was tall. Marcos was hungry. Marcos was sleepy. I don't know. That's what a context clue. Academic definition. An example. Non-example. Now I can go to a higher order question. Be careful. What we tend to do is, now who can tell me what a context clue is? Be careful with that. No, because they still can't put it in their own words. They're probably just going to tell you the definition. So we give them 2 examples. Here's an example of a context clue, and here's a non-example of a context clue. Can you tell me which one is the example, which one is the context clue? And can you tell me why the other one isn't the context clue? You'll see that a lot in our examples. You're always going to see, okay, when we ask the question, we give them the example and non-example as an answer, and can they differentiate? So it looks something like this. Let's ask our question now. Which words in the sentence are context clues that help determine achievement means success? Look, I have an unknown word. It's achievement, but they're telling me what it means. It means success. So if I have an achievement, it's something good. It's something, a success. It's something that I'll be proud of. For example, if I had to take a test and I studied all week and I got an A, that would be an achievement for me and I'd be very proud. It'd be a success. So let's see what the sentence is. Read it with me. 1, 2, 3. He celebrated his greatest achievement with all his friends. Achievement is my unknown word. What would be the context clues? Would it be with all his friends? Are those context clues? Or would it be he celebrated his greatest? Okay. On your whiteboards, write either A, if that's the context clues to help determine what achievement means, or is it B? Are those the context clues to help determine what achievement means? Right, A or B? Now talk to your partners. And when you talk to them, say, the example of a context clue is, and tell them why. Is it A or is it B? Okay, talk with each other. Blah, 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 blah. Now show me your whiteboards. Okay. Wow, we all got B. Well, I must have taught that very well, or you must know what context clues are. Usually you won't get all your students correct. So let me show you an example of differentiation. If you can bear with me, Kate, D, Camila, and Maddie, can I have you help me, please? I'd ask you to volunteer, but we're past that in our working relationship here. So we're going to use you as our examples here. So look, I need someone to be my underperforming student with a misconception. I need middle performing, and I need high.
Max being underperforming.
Okay, you volunteer for that one? Which one? Okay.
Underperforming.
Well, you know,
I'm in the middle.
Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's not underperforming. It's a misconception, you know. But I need to know how to scaffold those students. Okay, I need to know how to support them. So, Kate, you have A. You have a misconception. You think A is the example of context clue. Might actually be very high performing, but you might have a misconception. You're like, wow, isn't it a success to have a lot of friends? You know, wouldn't that be great? You can have a misconception. I need to understand that though. So on your whiteboard, can you please write A? Thank you. Camila, you are my middle performing student and you have B. Did his greatest. And by the way, I never tell my students where they're at, whether they're high, middle, or low. I know the teacher because I have to meet their needs. I have to support my students who struggle a bit more with more support, and I have to extend my high-performing students. We're all aware of that, so I never tell them that, but you know, I'm supporting them that way. Camila, you have B. You're my middle-performing student, and you understand. He celebrated his greatest is an example of context clue because when you celebrate something great, that must be some type of accomplishment or a success. That tells me what achievement means. Maddie, you're my high performing student who can get bored quite quickly if I don't let you, if I don't engage, if I don't extend your thinking. You easily knew it was B before I even taught context clues. But I have to find a way to extend you. Why is it not A? A is not an example of a context clue because there's not enough information on there. With all his friends, that doesn't give you enough of a context clue to tell me that achievement means success. It's too open-ended. Okay, do you understand the setup there? That's usually how my students are thinking. So I'll say 1, 2, 3, whiteboards up. Let me see your whiteboard. So Kate, Camila, and Maddie. So the first thing I see here, I see Kate is incorrect. I'm not going to call on Kate, but it's less than 30% of my class. If I just told Kate the answer, I would bore Camila and I'd bore Maddie. Okay, Maddie knows, Camila knows. Okay, let them teach Kate. You teach Kate, let them by echoing their answers and by elaborating their answers. Okay, so I don't even start with high. I want to gauge my class. I'll go to Camila. Camila, I saw that you have B. It's an example of a context clue. Why is B an example of a context clue? When you answer, please start. It's an example of a context clue because. Go ahead.
B is an example of a context clue because it tells us that an achievement is something to celebrate.
Beautiful. Celebrated his greatest. You know, that's an achievement. Those are context clues. Very nice. Maddie, you also have B. That's an example of a context clue. But why wouldn't it be A? Why is A not an example of a context clue? Go ahead.
A is not an example of a context clue because with all his friends doesn't give me any information about what the word exhausted means.
Yeah, what the word achievement means. I know what she meant. Okay, you went exhaust. What the word achievement means. Yes, it doesn't. With all his friends, what could he be doing? Having lunch, playing footy? Yeah, I need more there to get a context clue has to give me more information. Now I can gently go to Kate and I'd say to Kate, Kate, you've changed your answer, but can you tell me why you would change your answer? Go ahead.
Yeah, I changed my answer because I realized that A didn't help me with the definition of achievement being success. So I know that B tells me that achievement means success because it's great and excellent.
Yep. And that now she can think that. Now here, this is very important. Look, I don't believe one pedagogy trumps all. I really don't. You know, I think there's benefits of all types of pedagogy in education, and there's a place for all. I just think in certain times there are. Like I do believe explicit direct instruction is a great way to start and give your students great initial first teaching. We want to get to application. Sometimes I want a project that is inquiry or discovery. You know, I just believe there's a lot of room for a lot of different ways to do it. I just know how to do that. But more importantly, with whatever I'm teaching or how I'm teaching my students, the most important thing I can do as a teacher is the relationship I build with my students. Okay, that has one of the most effects of any type of teaching you have. The relationship you build with your students. When your students come to your class, are they comfortable? Do they feel safe? Do they feel respected? Do they know that you're there to support them? If they feel respected by you, they're more likely to respect you as well. So how you establish that in your classroom is very important before you try any manner of teaching. And, you know, sometimes those students, I've taught for a long time, some students are really tough. Some students cause a lot of, it's hard to reach them. You know, they take a lot of energy. But the reality is sometimes those are the students who need your support and love the most because there's probably some outlying issues. And the reason I say this is once I've established this relationship with my students, they understand that it's okay to try in my classroom. I only had 2 rules in my classroom. I had the golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated with respect and with kindness. And I had just give me effort. I just want genuine effort. And if you give me those 2 things, we will get through this together. And the reason I say that, because it's very difficult to tell a student, would you like to change your answer and would you tell me why? Okay, but they understand that in the beginning, they can try because I explained to them, if you can correct your own misconception, I'll never call them the incorrect answer first, but if you can clarify your own thinking, it's more valuable than me just telling you your answer because that still doesn't ensure that you know it. But can you tell me why? Okay, now, if I've used that strategy with Kate, I can't use that again later on in the lesson. I have to use a different strategy because if I go to that same student over and over, would you like to change your answer? Would you like to change your answer? Doesn't work because now I start creating anxiety in that student and they start feeling called out. They're like, oh no, you know, kids are smart. They're gonna see, oh, Kate needs help again. No. So the next time, someone even wrote this in the notes, Camila, can we offer support when posing a question? If I know Kate's going to be struggling, when I have my students pair share, I will go, and sorry, Kate, to use you, but this is important. I will go to Kate and I'll pair share while the other ones are answering. I'm like, look, Kate, what do you think right now before they put their answers on? And she's already got a pair share partner. So what do you got? What are you both thinking about this? I like, yeah, B, why? Oh, do you see how it helps me? That's the different ways I'm mixing it up. There's not one set way. I do this exactly this way every time. I have a lot of strategies that I use when I need to. Does that clarify that, my differentiation piece and that piece with Camila as well? Because eventually, when 80% of my students can do context clues independently with my class, I'm going to let them do independent work and I'm going to do in-class intervention with students who still need support. And it's usually about 5 or 6 students that I can just really show them a couple examples and give them that support to get them on track with my other students. Okay, so that's a piece of differentiation, and it's the beginning of Bloom's taxonomy of our higher order questions. Which is an example of a context clue? Is it A or is it B? How do you know? Why is B an example of a context clue? He celebrated his greatest. Why is A with all his friends not an example of a context clue? How does the example and non-example, why is A and B different? You know, that's the question I asked Maddie. Give me an example of a context clue, draw an example of a context clue, and the last question I will ask, in your own words, what is a context clue? Now, those are the types of questions I can, and it synthesizes Bloom's taxonomy. We're going to effective feedback. Effective feedback to generate 100% correct answers. I'm going to distinguish between whole class errors and individual student errors. Are more than 30% of my students incorrect? I'm going to reteach all of them. If less than 30%, I'm going to see if they can self-correct, like I did right there with Kate and Camila and Maddie. I echoed Camila's answer. I echoed Maddie's answer. This is one of my favorite lines in this workshop. I ask higher order questions to entire class. I'm asking it to my top students to engage them. I differentiate the responses for individual students. I de-escalate with my individual responses, and there's a lot of things I can do. Students are never allowed not to know the answer. You're going to see this quite a bit. Provide cues and prompts, okay? I always give my students cues and prompts. Who was my first person who I called on to tell me what a prefix was after I taught it? Who was that? Was that someone? Was it Helen? Yeah, I think I called on you, Helen, when I asked you to tell me what a prefix was. The first thing that I noticed was your color turned a little redder. You know, as soon as I asked you, what is a prefix? You got a little redder. Now, we go through anxiety. No one likes to speak on birth. So what was the first thing I tried to do? I showed you the gesture. I cued you. You know, you saw that. I don't know if you realize this, but I'm purposely doing letter or letters in front of it. Cued you because you practiced that. So that's what I mean by cues and prompts. Which one's an example of a context clue? How do you know? Okay, those are simple ways. Unit fraction. Which one's a unit fraction? The numerator. Why is the numerator the up number? For the U, what does the U stand for? Up. There's cues and prompts. Next one is, I'll come back to you. If I randomly select a student and I say, Rachel, which one's a context clue? How do you know? And she's stuck, I'll say, that's okay, Rachel. Don't worry. I want you to think about it. I'm going to ask a couple other students, but I will come back to you. In fact, you know what, Rachel? Let's have fun today. Call a lifeline. You have someone who you can ask to help you right now for this one. So I'll come back to you with another one. De-escalate to multiple choice. Which one's a character? Danielle, do you know? Is it because, and I'll give you 50-50, is it because it's a person, animal, or thing in the story? Or is it because it's just any random thing in the story? 50-50, I'm always giving them 50-50. Explain your thinking. Why do you still think it's with all his friends? Because eventually I want Kate to be able to confidently tell me, it's like, Mr. Y, you know what? I still think it could be A. I mean, isn't it a success or an achievement to have a lot of friends? Oh, I see what you're thinking here. Yes, it is a success, but in this sentence specifically, no, we're talking about what he did with all his friends. He already had the friends. He didn't make them. It's like he celebrated. So we can clarify that. 2 wrong answers, I reteach. That's even if I ask them if they have the right answers on their whiteboard. Can you tell me why you chose B? No. Can you tell me why you chose B? No. I have to reteach and maybe even reteach pair sharing. I'm showing you this because you're going to see a lot of this in my character lesson. Now, characters, let me show you. I'm going to show you 3 components of characters. This is usually my foundation. It's K for, we call it foundation kindergarten in the States. I know kindy, I think Western Australia calls their pre-foundation kindy. I don't know, is that the case? Yep. Every state has a different terminology like, of how they call their foundation. So the Australian standards say it's foundation. I'm going to do that. I'm going to teach learning objective. everyone do this really quick on how a teacher teaches learning objectives. Teacher read. Everyone do this. Teacher read. Go ahead and do that. Teacher read. Students read. Pair share. Pull a stick. Okay. Track with me. Students read. Pair share. Pull a stick. And you'll see why. Then I go to activating prior knowledge. Activating prior knowledge. How can I just get, hey, you guys already know something about this. Just look, we'll make, you guys already kind of know what a character is. You just don't know we call it a character. And then they're going to get to concept development. How do I do concept development? Academic definition, multiple examples, non-examples, higher order questions. Okay? So now you can see the first three components all in one. Okay. Before we start, let's look at this word. Characters. Can you pronounce and read that word with me? 1, 2, 3. Characters. Oh, and I'm sorry, I should preface this. You are my kindergarten or first grade students right now. So please remember, you're my I'm not trying to talk to you as kindergarten, but I'm trying to simulate what it would look like. So in fact, I wouldn't start like that. I'd say, good morning, all my little angels and rainbows and sunshine. How's everyone? Oh, can everyone put on their thinking cap and be ready to learn? And then, yeah, put that down right there. No, we're not playing that. No, that's fine. We're going to learn about character. I know you're a character. And we're not going to use that now. We're going to, it's like herding cats. I'm like, whoa, stop moving, but anyway, these are all the tricks. We're going to learn about characters today. So put on our thinking cap. First, let's look at this word, characters. It starts with CH. Sometimes CH is like Charlie, but here it's, can everyone make that sound? So it's characters. Characters. Everyone do that with me. Characters. Characters. That's how you read and pronounce that word. So now we're going to read the whole learning objective. Remember, my foundations are learning to read, so I'm going to break it down for them. My turn, we will identify. Your turn, we will identify. My turn, characters. Your turn, characters in a story. All right, let's put it all together. My turn, we will identify characters in a story. Everyone read that with me. 1, 2, 3. We will identify characters in a story. Wow, we're all such great readers this morning. I'm so proud of everyone. Can everyone, you know what? Rainbows or a partner, read to my butterflies. Read the learning intention today. Can you read to them really quickly what we're doing? Ready? 1, 2, 3. We will identify characters in a story. B partner, read to A partner. What are we doing today? We will identify characters in a story. Who can tell me what we're reading today or what we're learning today? Jen, can you read to me the learning intention today? And don't unmute because I need to speed this section up. We will identify characters in the story. Very nicely read, Jen. Catherine, can you read to me? We will identify characters in the story. Wow. See how I'm repeating? And I know this sounds silly, but I'm actually doing this purposely. We will identify characters in the story. We have 2 great readers there. Any volunteers want to show me and read this to me? And foundation year ones, they want to volunteer, especially on the learning objective. Yes, babe. Okay, don't fly out the window. Go ahead and read that. We will identify characters in the story. Anyone else? Beautiful. Okay. That's how we do a learning objective or intention in EDI. It's a bit scripted, but it's scripted for a reason. Teacher read, 1. We will identify characters in a story. Students read, 2. We will identify characters in a story. A's to B's, B's to A's. Random selection, couple volunteers. In 30 seconds to a minute, we can rehearse the academic and content vocabulary you're going to be reading throughout the lesson so you can read it with a lot of confidence. That's how we're getting our repetitions and exposures in. You probably saw identify. Do I need to define that to students? I could if I wanted to. If I'm making a decision, do I need to define that before it? And if I did, I could do it in 2 different ways. We will identify or find characters in a story. okay? Or if I want to teach that, let me show you how I teach vocabulary to my kids, okay? Before we read this learning objective, let's look at this word right here, identify. Can everyone say that word? Identify. Say it, okay? Identify. Look, identify means to find. When I say identify, you say to find. Let's do that. Identify. Identify. This is cross-referencing the brain with a simile, academic definition, academic word with a simpler word. Okay. When I say to find, you say identify. To find. To find. Identify. Now let's play the game. Identify. To find. To find. Identify. Ice cream. Oh, yeah, no. Identify means to find. I've kind of given them a definition. So I have to give them examples of it. Look, class, this is what I mean by identify. I can identify my pencil by looking at the three pens and pencils in it. I identify my pencil. Look, I can identify the door by looking, and I find the door. I can identify where the door is. With your partners, what does identify mean? Be partner, you go first. Identify means to, and now use it in your own sentence, okay? Okay. Now go into the questions after this. Blah, 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 blah. Yes. B partners, read to A's and use it in your own sentence. So that's how I would teach vocabulary if I needed to. I'm making a decision. We got a couple questions up here. How much prompting can you give if you come back to a student and they may have the answer, but they can't form the answer in a full sentence for lower students? Can they answer in short phrases, or do we continue to push for? No. Of course, Maddie. Look, some students might not be able to get you complete sentences. This is really common with my EL, English language learners sometimes. So I try to, if they're doing context clues and they point to B, I want them to at least try to practice. It depends on what level they are too. Can you say context clues? Yeah, I want them to practice that English. I don't know if if you have a lot of ELs in your school. Do you have a lot of ELs in your school? You do? So we just are, what word? Characters. Yeah. Characters. Point to the character. Yeah. Why? So that's why the gestures are, you can't have them. But keep in mind, if they are ELs, does everyone know how you learn a language, how you learn English? You know how to learn how to speak English? You know what the secret is? It's not really a secret. You know how you learn how to speak English? By speaking it. You have to have them speak as much as possible. So especially, and believe it or not, your ELs, especially your little ones, are going to get conversational English. They're going to get it on the playground. They're going to get it from TV. They're going to get it from exposure. What we really need to expose them to is academic and content, because that's that word. They're going to see we will in a story. It's like, no, practice this word, character. Yeah, character. What is, and you'll see how I can do that. So yes, you're making decisions. We make a lot of decisions in EDI. We don't have a real script of doing it. I just give you a lot of strategies that hopefully you can take and use them accordingly to your clientele. Okay? All right. You can give the sentence them to tag their response onto, or even reword their answer, then get them to receive. I always give them, look, I tell them, hey, when you answer, it's a context clue, because eventually I don't use sentence frames if my students really know complete sentences, because they want to try their own sentence. They might use context clue. I like the answer B because this told me that, and that's an example of a context clue. So you do it accordingly to how well your students are responding. All right. Saw a lot of cognitive, your students used a lot of cognitive energy to track with me, read with me, this learning objective. So now I don't track with me and read with me all of this. Answer the following questions. Which picture is a person? On your whiteboards, show me green or show me red. Is this picture a person? Or you can just show me thumbs up for yes, thumbs down for no. Go ahead and show me. Now, even here, teach your little ones how to differentiate. Ben, I saw that you said it's not a person. Why is it not a person? And look how tricky this is. This seems difficult at first. So Ben, why is that not a person? Now, don't answer right now, Ben. What is a kindergartner or a first grade or a second grader gonna say? I don't know. How did you know that was the answer? Oh, because my brain told me. No, teach them to justify. Is that picture not a person because that picture doesn't have a face, like eyes, a nose, and a mouth, or because it's a thing like a camera? 50-50. Oh, it's not a person because it doesn't have a face, eyes, or nose. It's a thing. See, that's my 50-50 de-escalation. Is this picture a person? Is that a picture? Show me yes or no on your whiteboards. Go ahead, show me. Why is that picture a person? Megan, can you go? Oh, that picture is a person because it's got a face. Oh, see how you can start teaching your little ones to justify? Does top have the t sound? Yes, yeah, top has the t. How do you know top has the t sound? I just know. I know because my brain told me. I don't know how I know. No. How do you? Is it because you hear the t in top? Or is it because you just guess? I just guess. No, it's because you hear the T on top, you know, but you teach them how to justify, and it's a process. I'm not gonna, but it's kind of, that's the beauty of teaching. You gotta love that or enjoy it because that's what you're trying to do. Which picture is an animal? And you go through that same, oh, because it has 4 legs and like, okay. The key is you make the connection. Students, you already know how to tell the difference between a person, an animal, and a thing. Well, in stories, we call people animals and things. Those are usually our characters. You already know how to do this if you can identify a thing, a person, and an animal. Most of the time, those will be my characters. Now, here's where the teaching of new information begins. Concept development, academic definition, examples, non-examples, higher order question. Get to my differentiation. Okay, track with me, my turn. A character is a person, animal, or thing in a story. Read with me. A character is a person, animal, or thing in a story. You know how I'll remember that? And someone said something about a gesture earlier. Simple, and have my students. I want you to do and say that. A character is a person because I'm a person. Everyone do that? A character is a person because I'm a person. Or animal because animals have funny ears. Explain your gesture. Or thing in a story because this is like a thing. I don't know what it is. But track with me. Characters talk or do something. Read with me. Characters talk or do something. Characters, not only are they a person, animal, or thing, but a character has to talk. Everyone show me talk. Can you talk? Yeah, you're talking. Or do something. Everyone do something. Something that a person would do. Okay? Academic definition. Now I got to contextualize it for my little one. All right, I'm going to read it first and you read. One day, a little girl named Josie was crying at the park. Let's all read that. One day, a little girl named Josie was crying at the park. Wait, I have a little girl. Everyone point to yourself because you're a person. Josie's a person. And so she's a person and she's crying. Everyone show me crying. Oh, well, Josie's doing something that a person would do. So Josie is a character in my story. She lost her ball. Your turn. She lost her ball. The dancing frog said, I have a gift for you, Josie. Oh, you know what? Let me read that again. I need a dancing frog voice. The dancing frog said, I have a gift for you, Josie. Everyone read that with me and use a dancing frog voice. 1, 2, 3. The dancing frog said, I have a gift for you, Josie. I have an animal. Frogs are animals because they have funny ears. And he's dancing. Everyone show me dancing. What's the frog? What's the floss or whatever the kids are doing these days? Yeah, he's dancing like a person's dancing. But what else does that dancing frog do? He talks. I have a gift for you, Josie. That dancing frog is a character in this little story. It was a new ball. Everyone read that? It was a new ball. Well, wait a second. Not a character in a story. I have a thing. It's a ball, but it's not a character. Everyone show me that. It's not a character. The ball is not a character. But wait, the ball bounces and I kick the ball and yes, the ball will bounce. It does what a ball does, but does your ball talk when you're playing footy with it? No. Does it? No. So it's just a thing. It's not a character. It's just a thing in the story. That's not a character. And then I have a gift, and that gift doesn't talk or do something. But I got a gift from my birthday. No. We're talking about our story. Let's put that aside. The gift in this is not a character because it doesn't talk or do something. That's what it has to be to a character. So this is the reality of teaching. Always refocusing your students to the important part, especially your little ones. Someone mentioned the short attention span. It's just the reality. In fact, I always say, look, any side note will go on our parking lot board, and we will discuss it at another time. I've got to maximize my attention here. Okay. Can the monkey be a character in a story? Explain. Is this monkey a character in a story? Explain. And when you answer, say it's a character because, or you can answer it is not a character because. Show me with your whiteboards. Red dot for no, green dot for yes. Okay. So I can go there. Yes, it's a monkey. It's a character because it's playing a guitar that a person has. Yes. What else can I ask to extend a high-performing student? What else would that monkey playing a guitar have to do to be a character? It would have to talk. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Let me show you an example of differentiation with this question here. Can the park be a character in a story? Explain. Can this park be a character in a story? Talk to your partners, right? Either no, it is not a character for green dot, or yes, it is a character. Show me on your whiteboard, yes or no. Okay, very nice. So let's do some differentiation. Ben, Terry, Lisa. Okay, Ben, you will be high-performing student. You have yes. Oh, no. Now, see, maybe you're not the high-performing student. Okay. Ben, you have no. Okay. You have no. Terry, middle-performing student, you also have no. It's not a character because park is usually a setting in a story. And Lisa, you have a misconception that it is. And it's a very common misconception at this age. Early childhood uses a lot of inanimate objects in its literature. The usual misconception is that things in the real world do things. Like, oh, I thought it was a character because I've seen butterflies flying, so it's doing something. And I've seen leaves blowing in the wind, so it's doing something. It's a very common misconception, okay? So that might be your thinking about that. So the way I elaborate is really important. So Terry, show me no. Ben, show me no. Lisa, show me yes. So here I'm setting this up, and I'll go to Terry. Terry, yes, that's not a character. Why do you think that park is not a character? When you answer, say, it's not a character because and I know you unmuted yourself, but your microphone is, it's not you. You unmuted yourself. So I'm hearing her say, yeah, it's not a character because it doesn't talk or do something. It's actually, we'll talk about this in another lesson. It could be the setting. Very nicely done. Ben, you also said, no, the park is not a character. But how could that park become a character? What would it have to do? What would that tree have to do to become a character? Ben, can you tell me?
For the park to become a character, it would need to talk or do something.
Yes, and can that's, see how I'm asking him to extend and to even create, and then I would go to the Lisa. Do you still think the park is a character? Can you explain and can you justify? And I want to show skill development and guided practice, but you see how I'm doing that, the differentiation piece? Lisa's getting a lot of exposures, but instead of just answering her first, not Lisa, anyone who has the encouragement, I'm giving Ben a chance to teach her by echoing. I'm giving Terry a chance to do it, so I don't do that. The differentiation piece is really important. Okay.
And Joe, you're going up against time here.
I got 5 minutes, so I want to show skill development and guided practice, and I'll do that in a math example, 3rd grade. A unit fraction represents one equal part of a whole. Numerator is always 1, So it's 1/4. If I have 1, 2, 3, 4 parts of a whole, the unit fraction is always 1/4. All the parts have to be equal. So this could not be a unit fraction. And here's my hierarchy. Which one's an example of a unit fraction? How do you know? It is B because all parts are equal. It would be 1/3 because the unit fraction is always 1. This, not the parts are equal. Concept development. But now that they understand that, let's teach them how to create unit fraction. So first we do one step at a time. Let's read the problem. Skill development, teacher does. Guided practice, students do. Let's read the problem. What is the unit fraction of the circle? Read with me. What is the unit fraction of the circle? We're going to determine the unit fraction. The first thing I do is count my equal parts. I do the first one. 1, 2, 3. I have 3 equal parts. So I write 3 in my denominator. D stands for down for denominator. Now, the second part, unit fractions, the numerator or U for up is always 1. So I know to create a unit fraction of this, it would be 1/3 or 1/3. Okay, students, in skill development, when we model this, then I ask my kids a question. How did I come up with this unit fraction? Can you articulate my thinking? I don't, can the students explain how you did it? If they can tell you how you did it, then they're going to apply it to their own problem solving. Yes. Oh, Mr. Y, you counted the 3 parts, 1, 2, 3. So that gave you that down number, or no, not down number. What is it? Denominator. What's that word? Denominator. Yeah, denominator. D for down. Okay. And what's my numerator? 1. Yeah. So how do I interpret the unit fraction? Yeah. The unit fraction 1/3 represents 1 part of 3 equal parts. That's how I did it. Now it's your turn. Let's all do this together. What is the unit fraction of the circle? With your partners on your whiteboard, I want you to write the denominator. How many parts does this circle have? Show me with your whiteboards. Beautiful. Why did you choose Bell and Lee? Why did you put 2 for your denominator? Choose the denominator because?
We counted 2 equal parts.
Beautiful. You have 2 equal parts. 1, 2. The total number of equal parts will be my denominator. I always know denominator is the down number because it has D. So I put 2 there. Everyone, what number is always my numerator in a unit fraction? Everyone tell me at once. 1. Beautiful. That's how I come up with my unit fraction. 1/2. Now to interpret this, the unit fraction 1/2 represents 1 part of 2 equal parts. Skill development, teacher did. Guided practice, students did. Okay? And then relevance, we just teach our kids why it's important to learn that. And closure, can they do it independently? And in fact, a lot of closure. Now, can they extend their thinking? Relevance, hey, this is why it's important to learn about context clues. It'll help you learn new vocabulary words. You might be tested on it. You can do good on tests. You can do well on tests. And then closure, can you do this independently? Okay, without pair sharing, on your whiteboards, write your answer, cover your answer, don't show anyone. Show me who can do this independently. Okay, the students who are still struggling, come with me. I won't say that word. I take those students and I let the ones who can work independently go work independently in partners. But maybe some of those higher students who are really getting it can start creating sentences with context clues. Hey, here's a chipmunk. Can you write me a sentence to help me describe this? Yeah. The tiny chipmunk, because it's a tiny animal, wiggled his fuzzy tail and ran on. Look, cattails. I know you don't have cattails in Australia, but could you write a sentence with context clues with it? That's what I want them doing. So those are the 7 components of an EDI lesson. If you saw all my engagement norms used throughout there, track with me, read with me, gesture, pair sharing, whiteboards. That's how we're putting it all together. Very small exposure of what we're trying to do, but I really hope there's something you can take from this, and and then you can add it into your teaching toolbox, and then more importantly, you can help your students get that, help them move forward in their learning. I want to thank you very much for your time this morning, and I hope there's something you can take to help and support them. Thanks very much. It's been a pleasure working with you today. All right, thank you. Have a wonderful term 4. We're almost there to the to our break. So not that anyone's counting, but just in case you are, you got your, yeah, no. Here the joke in the States is, what are the top 3 reasons that you become a teacher? You know, do you know the top 3 reasons why you become a teacher in the United States? June, July, and August. That's our summer break. So we always say June, July, and August. So yours is probably December and January. But anyway, have a wonderful morning in term 4, and thanks for your participation. Take care, everyone.